Presidio Heights repeatedly tops the list for most expensive neighborhoods to live in all of San Francisco. Billionaires, titans of tech and industry, athletes, actors, all plop down millions of dollars to live here. But what really makes it so special? Why are people spending millions upon millions of dollars to live here? My name is Austin Klar. I'm a lawyer turned real estate agent in San Francisco and Marin County, and I'm going to break down all of that in a walking tour of the neighborhood. I'm going to show you why this suburban haven in San Francisco is one of the most desirable places to live, not just in the city, but in the entire country. We're going to explore the incredible homes, the top tier amenities. I'm going to break down what different homes and home types cost at different price points and in different parts of the neighborhood. I'm going to show you where people shop, where people eat. I'm going to break it all down. So let's get right to it. So we're going to start off the tour on the corner of Lion Street and Sacramento Street toward the southeast side of the neighborhood. Immediately to the east of where I'm standing right now is the Pacific Heights neighborhood, which has a lot in common with the Presidio Heights neighborhood, except it's a lot larger and a lot more dense. A lot similar housing stock, very luxurious, very expensive, and a lot of great amenities, but a little bit of a different character. I've got separate videos on the pros and cons of living there. It's actually where I live, as well as the cost of living there, and a whole walking tour similar to this video for that neighborhood. So if you want to learn more about the Pacific Heights lifestyle and about the neighborhood, I'll link those videos in the description below. You can go check them out. And if you like videos just like this, I make videos about what it's like living in San Francisco every single week, so make sure to subscribe to my channel. Anyways, back to Presidio Heights. So the reason I want to start on this corner and line in Sacramento Street is that Sacramento Street is one of the main commercial corridors of the Presidio Heights neighborhood. There are really two: Sacramento Street, which is where a lot of, interior design and home goods shopping is, as well as some of the best food in the area. And then I'm going to show you California Street, which is the other main commercial corridor of the area. It's a lot busier, a lot more car traffic, and it's where things like, grocery stores, banks, and other staples are for the area. But I'm going to take you down Sacramento Street first and show you some of my favorite shops, my favorite restaurants, and places to walk around in the neighborhood. Let's go check it out. So one of the things that's the most unique about Sacramento Street is, the types of properties that you're going to find on this stretch of the street. Almost all of them, as you'll see, are mixed use with, commercial space, either like retail or restaurants on the lower level. And then on the upper level, there's going to be housing. So that's actually university, high school, not mixed use at all. But as you'll see coming down here, there are a ton of shops and restaurants on lower levels of these buildings. And then you have housing units on top. So this stretch of Sacramento Street is actually where you're gonna find like most of the condos in Presidio Heights. Most of the housing that you're gonna find is single family homes in Presidio Heights, and they're gonna be, largely to the north of Sacramento Street, which I'll show you in a few minutes. And trust me, you definitely don't want to miss them because they are architecturally incredible, some of the most beautiful and historic homes in the city. But here on Sacramento Street, it is, mostly condos. So you should expect like smaller 1 to 3 bedroom units, less than 2,000 square feet with shared yards. There are obviously going to be exceptions to that, but that's what you'll most typically see in the area. And as you can see, you can already start to see the home goods stores in the bottom taking up these, retail spaces in these mixed use buildings. So Anthem is very, very popular. And I'll show you some of my other favorites as we keep walking. But there's De Gournay, which is a wallpaper store on the corner there. In between these two buildings is the Vogue Theater, which is a single screen, super old school Art Deco movie theater. They play a lot of classics, but they also play, new stuff, just depends on what happens to be out, but really cool space. And a couple doors down from Anthem, I'll head back a little bit, is Sorel, which is a Michelin-starred restaurant. A lot of very high quality food on Sacramento Street. There's also a lot of, very casual food as well, but Sacramento Street's where a very high concentration of fine dining is in the area. When they're open, they have, outdoor seating at this parklet, which is really, really pretty with the lights and when the weather is nice at night. Beautiful olive trees here. So you can see they have a setup outside here, which they started during the pandemic for outdoor dining. Jewelry stores. You've also got some construction companies that have offices here. So Taboni Group, they're developers. They do a lot of work in Presidio Heights specifically. You also have architects' offices, all that stuff. So pretty much anything you can think of relating to fashion and home, you're gonna find it on Sacramento Street, which is great. And you can see more examples of these mixed-use buildings, furniture stores, consignment stores, all that stuff. So there's a pretty wide variety here. Neon's a pretty popular interior design store as well. I don't shop there as much, but they make a lot of really great ceramics, beautiful storefront, relatively new. So we're now at the corner of Sacramento Street and Laurel. This is one of my favorite parts, like residential parts of Sacramento Street. So on Laurel, between Sacramento Street and California Street, is this little stretch of basically identical historic Victorian homes. They're all very small, less than 2,000 feet. Some are like 1,400 square feet, but they sell well into the 2 millions. They're very, very expensive because the block is so idyllic and it is very close to Laurel Village, which is right on the other side of California Street right there, which is where like a bunch of shopping and food and like banks and stuff like that is. So not only is it a very pretty place to live, but it's also a very convenient place to live. And I'll show you California Street and the shops that are over there in a couple of minutes. So you've got Presidio Kebab right there, which is a casual Mediterranean spot. Really good spot for quick food when you just need something like in the middle of a work day. They deliver, which is great. You can also do pickup. It's very easy to walk to, and they do everything really fast, and the food's pretty solid and not super expensive. Across the street is Tracy Simmons Design. She's an interior designer. You'll notice in addition to like all the interior design like stores, a lot of designers actually have studio space in these commercial office spaces, and some of them even like live in those buildings, which is pretty cool. And you'll see a couple other very well-known interior designers have offices here. I'll point them out. Garibaldi's restaurant is right there. I think it's like a white tablecloth, old school Italian restaurant. Really, really good. And obviously you have staples like, you know, local dry cleaners and wash and folds and things like that. You know, my favorite parts about Sacramento Street are interior design stores and the food. The food is phenomenal, but I do a lot of like interior design shopping here as well. So a lot of coffee table books, pillows, ceramics, plates, like all kinds of stuff you can get here, which is great. In addition, you also have like your fair share of, you know, beauty spots. There are multiple salons, nail spas, there's maternity clothing places, men's clothing places. Like it's not just design, it's fashion and design focused. This is another one of my favorite places to go, Hudson Grace. Really awesome selection of coffee table books, really nice smelling candles. Definitely recommend checking it out if you're in the area. They get really seasonal with their decorations, which I love. They have like candy buckets and stuff for Halloween, which is really, really fun. This is a runner's mind, great athletic wear, run shop. You see people like trying on shoes and like running down the road all the time. Charles W. Thomas is a great salon. My partner gets his haircut there. Rims and Goggles eyewear shop, more condos, more dry cleaning, antiques. You really have pretty much anything that you could possibly need either on this street or really close by. And we're getting close to my favorite restaurant, not just in Presidio Heights, but in all of San Francisco, which is Spruce. So this is my favorite restaurant in not just Presidio Heights, but all of San Francisco, Spruce. Right outside of it right now, I'll show you some of the interior. It is gorgeous. The architecture and interior design is beautiful. It is a little bit more formal, definitely white tablecloth. They used to have a Michelin star. They don't anymore. Food tastes exactly the same. I don't know the history of how or why they lost it, but the food is incredible. And what I love the most about it is that they're super flexible in terms of how you eat at the restaurant. So if you sit in the dining room, it is a set menu, but you can order stuff from the bar menu and substitute it in for entrees and stuff in the set menu. You can order pretty much anything extra a la carte. And when you're sitting at the bar, you're not limited to the bar menu. You can get anything off the regular dinner menu as well. So really flexible. It is kind of casual feeling in that sense, even though it is a very formal restaurant. My favorite thing to get there is their burger. Add cheese and bacon for sure, but it's really unique, really, really good. Comes on an English muffin bun. The bacon is like thick cut, like pork belly style bacon. It is phenomenal, but they make so much other great food. Love coming here, at the end of the week and just hanging out at the bar. They have lounge seating at the bar. It's really, really awesome. Definitely worth checking out if you're in the area. It is A+ food, 100% worth it. And as we keep, walking down Sacramento Street, you can see more of these mixed-use spaces and the condos above. Sacramento Street, I would say, has among like the least expensive housing in Presidio Heights because it is a little bit busier. It's harder to park. It's a little noisier because you have these businesses nearby. California Street is definitely going to be a little bit less expensive because it is a lot busier on California Street. It's just a different type of street altogether, which you'll see in a second. But Sacramento Street on the whole tends to be the least expensive place to live in the neighborhood just because of its character. Just rough numbers, you're going to be really hard pressed to find even like a one bedroom for much less than $1 million. They exist, but probably without parking. You should really be expecting to spend close to, if not slightly more than $1 million on a one bedroom here. And then you have like the ultra luxury 3-4 bedroom condos, newer construction, sometimes new construction, but pretty rare in Presidio Heights. You're more likely to find like historic buildings that have been modernized than you are new construction, but it does exist. For condos, that will go 15, 16, 1700 a foot. You're really not gonna find things that break above that. That's when you start getting into like single family territory in other parts of the neighborhood, which I'll show you in a few minutes. So like all that sounds super expensive, and it definitely is super expensive, but when you consider it in relation to the rest of the housing stock that's available in Presidio Heights, it's actually very reasonable. It's one of the most reasonable and affordable, relatively speaking, places to get a property in Presidio Heights. And one of the things that you'll notice about this stretch of Sacramento Street is that it is relatively flat. So super easy to walk around, walk home with a bunch of your shopping bags and things like that. Very easy to get around. I will say one kind of negative of Sacramento Street is the parking. Parking is really, really difficult here because of how many businesses there are. So if your place does not have parking, that's definitely something to consider. You might not want to live on Sacramento Street if it doesn't have parking. It's not really easy to park on the street on Sacramento Street because all of it is metered parking for most of the stretch of Sacramento Street that runs through Presidio Heights. So, you can't like go to work all day and leave your car outside because the spots are going to be metered and you can't keep refilling it even remotely. So you either need to find like a rentable parking spot in a garage nearby or park further into the neighborhood. So definitely something to think about if you're thinking about moving into a place on Sacramento Street that doesn't have parking or doesn't have enough parking for the number of cars that you have. But luckily, super walkable area, easy to get around. Definitely don't need a car walking here. I'll show you where like the closest grocery stores are and stuff. Very close walk from anywhere on Sacramento Street in Presidio Heights. Another thing that you definitely need to think about if you're thinking about moving into a place on Sacramento Street is the noise. It is not like cars are, blazing back and forth down the street. It is a pretty slow street. It's not like a super main street, but there is a lot of foot and car traffic, so there is going to be noise. And what you can see from, these videos that a lot of the housing stock is relatively older. So one of the things that you're always gonna have to look out for is the condition of windows. Are they single pane, double pane? How recently have they been replaced? If they're single pane, you may really want to consider replacing them because you are gonna hear like that ambient noise. Another thing to think about is just the orientation of the space. Is there a bedroom in the front or are all bedrooms in the back? Is your main living space in the front? Are you going to be able to hear the street noise and stuff when you have guests over, whatever it is? These are the same considerations that you need to be thinking about if you're thinking about living on California Street. I would say that California Street is way more busy than Sacramento Street, way louder. So the considerations are, go doubly true for that street. And, for that reason, housing on California Street is actually going to be even less expensive, relatively speaking, than it is on Sacramento Street. Still very expensive because, we are in Presidio Heights, but a lot less expensive than homes further north into the neighborhood that I'll show you in a few minutes. So because it is such a main street, just something else to think about, in addition to the parking issue that I talked about earlier. And these same considerations are things that you need to think about if you are living on California Street.
So we've now walked all the way from Lyon Street to Arguello Street along Sacramento. This marks the far western edge of Presidio Heights. I'm now going to take you one block down, one block south to California Street and show you, one, how busy California Street is and how different it is compared to Sacramento Street, and two, show you where, most people in Presidio Heights go to get their groceries and go to the bank, run random errands, things like that. And what you can see is that Arguello is also a very busy thoroughfare. If you keep taking Arguello up, you will hit the Presidio National Park, which I'll show you later in this video. People drive through the Presidio from like the Golden Gate Bridge and from the marina to get to other parts of the city. So Arguello is a very busy street and it intersects with California Street, which is right here, which is, I think, by far the busiest street on this side of town. So in addition to being a gas station right here, there's actually a car repair shop as well. And you don't see any right now, but more often than not, when I come by here, I see like Ferraris and stuff out in the driveway. Pretty cool. So as you can see already, like California is a much larger street, 2 lanes on each side, and there's a ton more car traffic and they're traveling at much higher speeds than on Sacramento Street. Like there are no stoplights on that stretch of Sacramento Street we just walked down. It's all stop signs. This is all, lights. So people are traveling way faster on this road, and as a result, it is substantially busier and a lot louder as a result if you live on California Street. So because it's so busy, one of the big drawbacks of living on California Street is like backing out of your garage when you're trying to leave your house. It can kind of be a pain in the butt, just like if you're on another busy street. You know, some of the busier streets like in Pacific Heights or lower Pacific Heights like Pine and Bush, those 3 streets in my opinion are the busiest streets on this side of the city. So if you have to back out of your garage onto one of these busy streets, it can be tough. And that's just another reason why living on one of those busy streets is a lot less expensive than living further north on like the quieter, slower streets. But one of the positives of California is that just like Sacramento, it is relatively flat. So it is a pretty easy walk. Even if you live on California Street at the edge of Presidio Heights and you want to go to the grocery store, which is where I'm walking right now, there's actually a couple that we're walking to that I'm going to show you. It is really not hard to get to, not an arduous walk at all. They do make it really easy, and you can use the bus system if you really want to, or of course, you know, you could drive. There's actually, I would say, definitely compared to Pacific Heights, Presidio Heights has way more parking options available, especially as you get north into the neighborhood. No parking meters whatsoever. A lot of streets have parking pretty much readily available at all times a day, and it's one of the safest neighborhoods in the city. You know, I've never had any issues parking my car there. Obviously, that's anecdotal, but it is by far one of the safest places to park in the city because residents there, they have a lot of money. A lot of them have private security monitoring the streets, roaming around, so you don't see a lot of car break-ins in this specific part of the city, which is great. We're on our way to the grocery store and walking by what are now defunct medical centers. Is the CPMC medical campus. This is actually the site of a pretty big proposed housing development, the largest one in this part of the city. I'd say in the last 50 years. It's being developed by the Prado Group. They've been going back and forth with the city a lot over, how taxes are going to be handled for the project and, change some of the tax rules to better enable them to financially get this project started sooner than later. Plans do call for several hundred units to be in what is now just underutilized or really not utilized medical campus. And in a city like ours where we desperately need more housing units, there's obviously a big push to get this development to move forward. They're also developing another site nearby. So between the two, it's going to be, I think, well north of 1,000 housing units, once it gets developed. And the architecture is really cool, very almost like French style, colonial style architecture. It's not really Victorian, so I wouldn't say it necessarily 100% fits in with the neighborhood, but it actually does look really cool, at least in the renderings. So all of this basically is going to become housing at some point, which is, going to be great. So we're now coming up on Spruce Street, which is where we went into the restaurant Spruce. The other side of California Street and Spruce is the start of Laurel Village, which is technically in the Laurel Heights neighborhood immediately to the south of Presidio Heights. But Laurel Village is the main shopping center, or strip mall effectively, that services the Presidio Heights neighborhood and of course, the neighboring areas to the south. So, they've got a Walgreens here, there's an Ace Hardware here, Starbucks here. There are 2 grocery stores here that I come to all the time. One of them in particular, Brian's, has the nicest meat counter butcher in anywhere in the city, in my view, for a grocery store. Really beautiful cuts of meat, a lot of Kobe and Wagyu meats. They have sushi grade fish, so you can come buy fish here, make poke bowls or sear tuna, things like that. Really amazing produce, beautiful storefront. Calmart's the other grocery store that is in this shopping center. They also have a great butcher as well. Different selection of meats in many cases. Neither of them are particularly cheap, unfortunately. Brian's is super expensive. Calmart, I would say, is just super expensive. Both of them are very expensive options, but great selection of stuff, and that's really what you have in this particular area. If you want to go, to a Trader Joe's or a Safeway, you're gonna have to drive a little bit further away, so not quite as convenient. As great as Laurel Village is, the one thing that drives me friggin' nuts about this place is the parking lot. For whatever reason, they constructed this parking lot so poorly. The lanes are so narrow, and they actually have if you don't pull in all the way, it's really hard to actually navigate. So much so that they have parking attendants walking the parking lot at all times and basically leaving notes on people's car, telling them that next time you come here, you need to pull up. They're not ticketing people,
because unfortunately it's not illegal to just be a bad parker, but it's just funny that, you know, they have people monitoring the parking lot, telling people that they need to pull in, because if people don't pull in all the way, like, it's almost impossible to navigate this parking lot. I'm here at a not very busy time of day, but if you come here at like 5:30 p.m. during the week when everybody's doing their grocery shopping, it's a nightmare. It is impossible to navigate. It drives me insane. So we got an Ace Hardware right there. There's a paper source right here so you can get greeting cards and stuff. They recently put a Panda Express in here, which I have not gone to yet, but I love Panda. Sue me. Susie Cakes is great. They make really awesome cupcakes and cakes. Super, super expensive, but it is what it is. You've got Emily Jobert right here, which is like a kind of like almost a French countryside vibe interior design home and garden center. Really cute. Got a lot of great stuff in here, which is nice. They've also got a US Bank. They have a Wells Fargo here. Proposition Chicken's a good place to get like fried chicken. They also have matzo ball soup, which is really good. Wine Impressions, great liquor store, great selection of wine and liquor at Wine Impressions. A lot of times when I can't find things at other stores, they have it, so great to have locally. So we started at the corner of Lion Street and Sacramento Street, and we walked west to Sacramento and Arguello and showed you all those shops and restaurants. Then we walked south to California Street and then all the way back east to Lion Street, and now I've walked up 2 blocks to the corner of Lion and Clay Street. And I'm stopping here because I think this is where the neighborhood starts to really change. And you start to see why this neighborhood is such a special neighborhood. You see the architecture, the peacefulness, the walkability, all of it starts to change basically right here. So it's gonna be a stark contrast to what we just saw on Sacramento Street and California Street. So I'm gonna walk you down Clay Street. I'm gonna point out some noteworthy houses along the way. We're gonna go up north to some of the really amazing streets of the area. Washington Street, which is my favorite, Jackson Street. I'm gonna show you the Presidio and all the architecture along the way.
So one of the first things that you notice on Clay Street are these slow street signs. Basically, during the pandemic, to create a more walker-friendly, biker-friendly environment and to encourage people to come outside, they put these stakes in the ground on streets all over San Francisco, and the one for this neighborhood was Clay Street. Basically make it a little bit more difficult for cars to navigate this area, make it more habitable for walking and just hanging out outside, when that was a real luxury in San Francisco, especially in the early days of the pandemic. So people would come out in the street, go running, walk their dogs, what have you, and just really take in the beautiful streets, the trees, the architecture.
Really great. And all over the city, a lot of the slow streets have been removed, but Clay Street is one of the few streets in the city where it actually remains a slow street. Who knows how long that's going to last? We'll see, but I love it. I think it's great. It's a little bit annoying if you're driving in a car, but for the most part, if you're driving on Clay Street, you're not really going that far anyway, so not a huge deal. And I think it really adds to the character of the neighborhood. I hope they keep it. And one of the things you notice about Clay Street, just like Sacramento Street and California Street, is that in the east-west direction, it is relatively flat. So great that you have those slow streets, really easy to walk around, really easy to park on the street, get in and out of your garage. Really nice, really pleasant neighborhood. So you see like people bike around here all the time. People walk their dogs here all the time. Great for families, great for pets, everything. And as you can see, there's a house behind me on the corner there that has a flag on it. Over the past several decades, a lot of countries have actually bought houses in the area and set them up as consulates. And a lot of them have moved in here and then since left and relocated to like other parts of downtown or just left the city altogether. But there are a few that remain in the neighborhood, and it's really cool to see, you know, like these government buildings take over like these classic San Francisco homes and kind of make them consulates. It's really hard to find like investment property or fixer type properties in Presidio Heights for under $1,000 a foot. This home right here, 3575 Clay Street, is a perfect example. It was a beautiful home, really spacious, great lot. It did need some modernizing. It was 5,000 square feet on a 5,000 square foot lot, which is about double the size of your standard San Francisco lot, which is 25 by 100. And it sold for $7 million, so just shy of about $1,400 a foot. So when you're thinking about, you know, what fixer properties go for on good blocks in the area, over $1,000 a foot easily, and that one went for $1,400 a foot because it being a detached and having the lot that it did. It didn't have like the best views to the north because it's on the south side of Clay Street, but it was an incredible house, really awesome layout, great scale and history inside. And this blue house up here on the right, I actually tried to buy it for a client, is a total fixer, but it has a whole level underneath that could be expanded and add to the square footage of the house, and it has an oversized lot with incredible views. You don't always get the best north-facing views from Clay Street, but there are a couple blocks, 3500 block, 3600 block, where on Clay Street you're high up enough where you can see over the houses that are to the north of you on like Washington and Jackson, and you get these incredible north-facing views. That house was one of them, had one of the best view profiles of any house I've ever seen on Clay Street. It was about 4,000-ish square feet, 4,500 square feet. It was a total fixer, sold for $6.5 million. They originally came on the market at $9 million, sold for $6.5, and when somebody has their way with it and everything's done with that house, if they add square footage to it and everything, turned it into like a 6,000 square foot house, it'll easily sell for north of $11-12 million. So great investment for whoever ultimately bought that house.
And then you have houses like this on the opposite end of the spectrum. These are, between 7 and 10,000 square feet, and they're set up from the street. Their main levels start one level up, so their view profiles are among the best you can get on Clay Street, and these sell when they're turnkey over 2,200 foot. This one right here, where all the construction's going on, about 7,700 square feet, sold for a little over $19 million a couple years ago. So super, super expensive homes on this street, but the architecture of these, the details, the scale, they're all incredible, unlike anything else you'll see in other parts of the city. Some general rules of thumb for pricing in Presidio Heights: if the house has views, north-facing views, and it's turnkey, you should expect to spend at least $2,000 a foot, likely north of $2,200 a foot, going all the way north of potentially $3,000 a foot. If the house needs work, depending on whether it's on like a flat block, a hilly block, a block that runs north to south versus east to west, if it's on the south side of the block versus the north side, what the lot profile is, if it's fully detached or not. If the layout's optimized, even if it needs a lot of work, you should expect to spend between $1,400 a foot to like $1,700-ish a foot. So very, very expensive to get even into like fixer properties in the area. And if something's like a true mega fixer, like basically a tear down, you're buying land value, think of it as, about $1,000 a square foot for that project, depending on which block it's on, what part of the block it's on. Every house, it's going to be an individualized determination, obviously block by block, location by location within that block, but those are just general rules of thumb to give you a ballpark. So now I'm going to walk you north from Clay Street, one street up to Washington Street, which is my personal favorite street in Presidio Heights. I think that it has like the best collection of architecture and homes with scale. The most expensive house that sold in San Francisco last year is on Washington Street. I'll show you that as well. It's gorgeous, but it's one of the most pretty, tree-lined streets in all of San Francisco. Very desirable, very expensive.
One of the nice things about Washington Street, even more so than Clay Street, is how wide the streets are and how well maintained the streets are. So it's very, very easy to drive around. It's very easy to park. You could feel safe, like if you're running, not on the sidewalk in the street, or you're biking, that like you're not gonna get clipped by a car. There's plenty of space to navigate. Very, very kind of relaxing environment because of how open everything feels compared to other streets in San Francisco. The house in the middle here, this white house in the middle here, sold recently for $11.3 million. This was Julia Roberts' old house. It used to be painted green. She moved over to Pacific Heights, but a lot of actors and billionaires and athletes, all that, like I mentioned, live in this area because it's so nice, quiet, peaceful, safe, and it's beautiful.
This house with the scaffolding right here was the most expensive house that sold in San Francisco last year. Right here on Washington Street, it was about 9,800 square feet, and it sold for over $3,500 a foot, about $34.5 million. It was originally listed for $45 million. So big haircut, but really big price point, even with the haircut. Beautiful home, a lot of scale and history, beautiful lot, and the views are stunning.
So we've now walked up and down in an east-west direction, Clay Street, Washington Street, Jackson Street, and a portion of Pacific, where most of the single-family homes in Presidio Heights are. And I wanted to end the house tour or architecture portion of the video at the corner of Pacific and Lion on the northeast corner of the Presidio Heights neighborhood, so right on the border of Presidio Heights and Pacific Heights. And I chose this corner because, as you can see, we are really, really high up, and behind me is the Presidio. So you got a stretch of homes right here that border the Presidio Wall and the Presidio National Park, which is incredible. So their views are unobstructed of the Presidio. The Presidio is basically their backyard. I personally, when I go on runs, I go through the Presidio. I go all the way up Clay Street from where I live to Arguello, up into the Presidio, then down through the Presidio, all the way to the water and like Marina Green. One of the most beautiful scenic runs in the entire city, and it is right in your backyard if you're living in Presidio Heights. Pretty awesome.
At the bottom of the Presidio, there's like a flat open green space where they set up food trucks. There's a brand new park, the Presidio Tunnel Tops, at the edge near the water, which has really great views. And there's an awesome little cafe there called Il Parco that serves pizza on focaccia crust. And you've got the Walt Disney Museum there. A great new restaurant, Delita, is there. The Presidio Bowling Alley is there. They're also opening a new food hall called the Mess Hall at the Tunnel Tops next year. It's really one of the best new parks, or best overall parks, New World, in the city, and it just keeps getting better. And as I mentioned, it basically is your backyard if you're living in Presidio Heights, especially if you live on this stretch of the neighborhood along the Presidio Wall. And that's why homes along the Presidio Wall tend to be very expensive. You are just really high up, as you could see, so the views are amazing. So as you can see, because of the lifestyle that living in Presidio Heights gets you, because of the architecture and how safe and how beautiful it is, it shouldn't really be much of a surprise that it is literally the most expensive neighborhood you can live in San Francisco. And things rarely come up for sale. People don't really necessarily want to leave here. Over the past 2 years, only 43 homes have sold. So only less than 2 homes a month. And when they do pop up, they are very, very in demand. Average price for these homes, about $8.6, $8.7 million, and about $1,600 a foot. So incredibly, incredibly expensive. And it's surprising at the price point how quickly they sell in just about a month on the market, which is really fast, generally speaking, but especially for homes that are that expensive. So if you're trying to find a 2,000 square foot home in the neighborhood, which is pretty rare because most of the homes are a lot larger than that, without breaking a sweat, even for something that's kind of a fixer, $3.5, $4 million without breaking a sweat. And it's most likely going to be way more than that, just because homes, for the most part, except those homes like the ones I showed you on Laurel earlier in the video, they're not really small. Most of them are huge. But obviously you don't need to, spend $8+ million to live in the neighborhood. As I mentioned earlier, and I showed you, there are condos that sell in the area on Sacramento Street, on California Street. There are some on other streets in the neighborhood, Jackson, Washington, but a lot less common than on Sacramento Street and California Street. And, you can get 1 bedrooms for close to $1 million, or, turnkey beautiful properties for, around $2.5, $3 million. So overall, yeah, it's really expensive, but there's a lot of upside for your investment. It's always an in-demand area, and it commands huge price premiums. As the market appreciates, this place appreciates just as much, if not more.
You might be wondering why somebody might choose to live in Presidio Heights over the neighborhood immediately east of it, Pacific Heights, which, has a lot of characteristics in common. It is not quite as expensive as Presidio Heights, but at the very high end, just as expensive as Presidio Heights, especially when you talk about living on Billionaires Row, where the most expensive home ever sold in San Francisco sold for $70 million. So definitely can get more expensive than Presidio Heights, but on average it tends to be a little bit less expensive, and it offers a lot of the same amenities. So why would somebody live in Presidio Heights over Pacific Heights? I think the answer is that it's just a little bit tighter knit of a community. It's a much smaller neighborhood. It's a lot less dense. There aren't like bars in the neighborhood at all. It's really just shops and restaurants. So you don't have as many people like visiting the neighborhood as you would if you're living in Pacific Heights. People obviously come for the food and the shopping, but not like they're getting crazy rowdy at these places or anything like that. Not that they do in Pacific Heights, but just more liable to do that if there are a bunch of bars nearby, like on Fillmore Street. But I think it's just a much quieter, much more suburban feeling version, kind of a little bit of a suburban haven or little oasis in the heart of San Francisco, far enough away from the hustle and bustle of it all, but close enough to where you're not really sacrificing anything if you live here. So I think that's why people choose Presidio Heights over Pacific Heights. I also think there's just a little bit of an air of exclusivity that comes with living in Presidio Heights. As I mentioned, 43 homes have sold there in the last 2 years. It's about double that in Pacific Heights because it's just so much bigger. There's a lot more inventory, a lot more turnover. So when you get a home in Presidio Heights,
it is something really, really special. Like living in Pacific Heights, it's very special for sure. Presidio Heights, some would consider it a next level up. And that's why a lot of billionaires and CEOs and athletes, famous people with a ton of money choose to live there. It's a little bit more private, a little bit more high end, a little bit more classy. It depends on where you're living in the area, within those areas, obviously. But I think it just has a little bit more of an air of exclusivity to it. Bottom line though, whichever one you go with, definitely not going to be doing anything wrong. There's no wrong answer. They're both incredible neighborhoods. I think Presidio Heights is like the most neighborhoody neighborhood on the north end of San Francisco. Seacliff is up there as well, but there aren't really even any restaurants or shops in Seacliff. It's just straight houses. So it feels very far removed from everything. Presidio Heights, I think, has a great balance of being kind of a suburban haven from the city and not without sacrificing what the city has to offer. But that's just my opinion. I would love to get your opinion, which one you'd prefer to live in and why, so let me know in the comments.
If you're thinking about relocating and having trouble navigating where the right neighborhood is for you in the city, or comparing neighborhoods to each other that you've had your eye on, or you just have general questions about the market given what's gone on in the city with interest rates, with home prices, definitely reach out to me. I was a lawyer at one of the world's biggest law firms before getting into real estate, and I've lived all over the city in the over 10 years that I've been here, so I'd be happy to be a resource for you. I'll leave my contact info in the description below. Just reach out to me, text, call, email, whichever, I'll answer. And before you go, if you want to learn more about what it's like living in Pacific Heights, I've got a few videos on it. One about the cost of living there, two about the pros and cons of living there, and another walking tour of that neighborhood just like I did for Presidio Heights. I'll link each of those in the description below. Go check them out. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one.